The final days of the Second World War were filled with tragedy, desperation, slaughter, and huge decisions that people had to make. Amongst the most chilling stories from the ruins of Nazi Germany was the fate of Magda Goebbels, the wife of Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels. Together, the husband and wife made a decision that has haunted history ever since, to kill their young 6 children inside of Hitler's underground bunker, before bringing their own lives to an end. In the days following Hitler's death, Magda Goebbels, who was often known as the First Lady of Nazi Germany, made her way into the gardens of the Chancellery, outside the bunker, and she then died. Her remains were then burnt, but this was done poorly, meaning her charred remains still existed, and days later her body was found disfigured and burnt. But what happened next had remained a mystery for decades, and few knew that the body of Magda Goebbels had existed on Earth for around 25 years after the war, before it was dealt with once and for all. And to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Magda grew up in a middle-class family in Berlin. Her early life was not unusual, but her rise into the inner circle of Nazi Germany was extraordinary. She married Joseph Goebbels in 1931, and they quickly became one of the most prominent couples in the Third Reich. Magda was admired by some Nazis as the First Lady of the Reich, after Hitler's partner Eva Braun, and she enjoyed a close relationship with Hitler himself. Hitler was godfather to her first child, and to many in Germany she represented the ideal Nazi wife and mother, attractive, devoted to her husband and raising a large family. By 1945, the Goebbels family had 6 children, all named with the letter H in tribute to you-know-who. They lived in luxury during the Nazi years, but as Germany collapsed, their world fell apart. By April of 1945, the Red Army had surrounded Berlin. The Nazi capital was in flames, food was scarce, and Hitler had retreated into his fortress bunker beneath the Reich Chancellery. Joseph Goebbels, as Hitler's loyal propaganda chief, refused to abandon his leader. Unlike many other high-ranking Nazis who tried to flee, the Goebbels family moved into the Führer bunker with Hitler. Life inside of the bunker was grim, was overcrowded, with stale air and constant bombing above, and the growing sense that defeat was only days away. Hitler, increasingly paranoid and unstable, gave frantic orders to armies that no longer existed. On April 30th, 1945, he took his own life, along with Eva Braun. And for the Goebbels family, this was the turning point. With Hitler dead, Joseph and Magda saw no future for themselves or their children. Magda Goebbels had been deeply devoted to Hitler. She once said that life without him was not worth living. And for her, the Nazi regime was not just politics, it was almost like a religion. With Hitler gone, she felt that Germany itself had died. Magda was faced with a choice: try to survive and escape, or surrender to the Soviets, or die with her family. She believed her children could not live in a world without National Socialism. In her twisted logic, killing them was an act of mercy, sparing them from what she imagined would be a life of shame and humiliation under Allied rule. Several witnesses later recalled that Magda openly spoke about her plan. She told Hitler's secretary that she did not want her children to grow up in a world without Hitler. She also confided to others that her children were too pure to be taken by what she saw as a corrupted world. On the night of April 30th, on May 1st, 1945, Magda set her plan into motion. A Nazi dentist, Helms Kunz, was ordered to give the children sedatives to make them sleep, and afterwards Magda and Hitler's personal physician, Ludwig Stumpfegger, placed cyanide capsules into each child's mouth. The children were dressed in their night clothes and tucked into their beds in one of the bunker's rooms. One by one, Magda and Stumpfegger crushed the capsules, killing all 6. Witnesses later said that Joseph Goebbels could not bring himself to watch. The murder of the Goebbels children remains one of the most disturbing acts of the war's final hours. The oldest, Helga, may have struggled, as evidence later suggests bruising around her mouth. Whether she fought against taking the poison, we will never know for sure. After the children were dead, Magda and Josef Goebbels prepared to end their own lives, and on the evening of May 1st, 1945, they left the bunker briefly, walking into the garden of the Reich Chancellery. There Josef shot himself, whilst Magda either bit into a cyanide capsule or was shot as well. It remains debated. Their bodies were quickly burnt by SS guards, just as Hitler's had been the day before. When Soviet soldiers entered the garden the next day, they found the charred remains of the couple. Though heavily burnt, the bodies were later identified as Josef and Magda Goebbels. The bodies were then autopsied, and it was clear who they belonged to. They were collected inside of a chamber, and the Soviets photographed the remains. Josef Goebbels' body was less burnt than Magda's, and it even had the prosthetic device he wore on his foot fitted to it. Magda's face was heavily disfigured. The remains of her children were brought next to her on the floor, but her corpse was blackened, and parts of it were still recognisable, such as her hands and legs. She was not reduced to ashes, unlike Hitler and his wife Eva. It was clearly the corpse of a woman, and found right next to Goebbels, it was without a doubt Magda. Little clothes existed on her corpse, these having burnt first, and it looked as if fuel had been poured over her face, and then this was ignited first rather than her feet. But after the photographs of her remains were taken, an autopsy was done, and the Soviets packed Magda's remains along with her husband and children away in coffins, and they were then taken to Magdeburg, a secret service facility there. The bodies were buried in a grave in a discreet location, allegedly under where some waste bins were stored. This also included the charred remains of Hitler and Eva Braun, and Magda's body was left there for 25 years. In 1970, as the facility was being handed over to the Germans, the Soviets had the bodies exhumed in secret and then dealt with once and for all. A secret service unit dug up Magda and the others, and then in secret put the coffins in the back of a truck, and then they were then taken to a local crematoria, where the bodies were burnt once and for all. The ashes of Magda and the others were then scattered in a river 25 years after her death, and 25 years after the end of the Second World War. The deaths of Magda Goebbels and her family shocked the world when the details became known. For many, the story symbolised the total moral collapse of the Nazi regime. While Hitler, Himmler and other top Nazis chose suicide, Magda's decision to kill her children added an extra layer of horror. Some historians have tried to understand her actions by looking at her psychological state. She was trapped, her world had collapsed, and she may have believed there was no alternative. Others argue that Magda's actions were the ultimate act of fanatical loyalty to Hitler and the National Socialism. The children, innocent victims of their parents' ideology, became tragic symbols of how Nazism destroyed families and lives. The death of Magda Goebbels was not simply an individual tragedy, it was a final, horrifying chapter in the story of Nazi Germany. Her choice to murder her 6 children showed how deeply she had surrendered her humanity to Adolf Hitler and his twisted ideology. While the ruins of Berlin were soon filled with new life and the rebuilding of Germany began, the image of Magda Goebbels in the bunker remained as a grim reminder of the dangers of blind loyalty and fanatical belief. Her actions left behind a haunting question. Was this the ultimate act of devotion or the ultimate act of cruelty? For most of history, the answer is clear. Magda Goebbels chose death, not only for herself but for the innocent lives she should have protected, and in doing so, she ensured that her name would forever be associated with one of the darkest moments of the 20th century. Thank you for watching, and to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. And once again, thank you so much for watching.